The third line of defense is a very specific defense, also called the adaptive immune response. The keys to the adaptive immune response is that it's very specifically targeted against a given foreign substance. That foreign substance is called an antigen. The system is set up to recognize specific antigens and mount a response only to those specific antigens that they were made against. It's systemic, so it's not restricted to the original site where a particular antigen was recognized, but that immunity will happen throughout the body. It also has a memory in that once the specific antigen that third line of defense is made against is encountered, it will remember and mount an even stronger attack on it when it's seen again. Antigens are really any substance that can excite the immune system and start an immune response. Some examples of common antigens are parts on proteins, sugars, some lipids, and really this picture is a good example where a given molecule has a lot of different features on the outside of that molecule, and the specific immune system can recognize certain features on the outside of that molecule, and if a particular part of the specific immune response recognizes a particular region on the outside of a molecule, that will start the specific immune response. Human cells and other cells have all kinds of surface proteins. Our immune cells don't attack our own proteins, and they are very specifically educated so that the cells of the specific immune system won't attack our own proteins. And as they mature, any of those cells that recognize proteins that are normally found on the surface of our cells will be destroyed. Now, the cells in another person's body, or a bacteria, or another kind of organism, if they get into our body, should be able to trigger an immune response because they're foreign and our specific immune response cells haven't been educated to just ignore them. So they will bind to them and recognize them as foreign and start the specific immune response. There's two kinds of specific immunity. One is called humoral. The humoral immunity is antibody mediated, where cells actually make chemicals that the chemicals go out and do the defense. And the main cells of this humoral immunity kind of system are called B lymphocytes, or B cells. The other kind of specific immunity is called cellular immunity. In this case, the main cells that do cellular immunity are called T lymphocytes, or T cells, and the cell itself carries out the attack. So in cellular immunity, it's the cell that carries out the attack. In humoral immunity, the B cells actually make a substance, an antibody, that goes out and does the defense itself. Lymphocytes, whether they're B lymphocytes or T lymphocytes, are all made in the bone marrow. They're made from the same precursor cell that makes red blood cells. But these cells then are exposed to lymph nodes and other organs to mature. And in the lymph nodes is where they actually get educated, go to school to figure out if they recognize something that is normally present, they're destroyed. If they don't, they are not. Specifically talking about humoral immunity now and looking at B cells. B cells, when they're activated, they become a kind of cell called the plasma cell. These plasma cells go around in your blood, and they're capable of binding to a specific antigen. When they're activated, they make a ton of antibodies, and this is a really cool picture of what an antibody looks like. It's a fairly complex structure, but each kind of cell makes only one kind of antibody, and those antibodies are specifically just floating around in the bloodstream looking for the antigen they were made against. So one type of B cell just pumps out a ton of antibodies, and those antibodies are all going around. One kind of cell makes one kind of antibody that goes around and looks for a particular antigen. Different kinds of B cells might make a different kind of antibody that'll go around looking for a different kind of antigen. Antibodies, when they find the antigen they were made against on something, they may just bind to that thing, and when they bind, they stop it from being able to work. Sometimes in bacteria or viruses, just the antibody recognizing the foreign thing and binding to it, they can stop it from acting. Sometimes they'll actually, and that process is called neutralization. They neutralize it so it can't work anymore. Sometimes when they bind, they'll actually bind to multiple things at once, and when they do that, they make it so big that it just agglutinates or kind of forms this big clump that can't really do anything. Sometimes the clump is so big that it actually precipitates. So it kind of, whatever tissue it's in, it's so big it can't float around in the blood anymore or in the interstitial fluid, and it just falls out. All of these forms of antibodies recognizing the antigen they were made against, either neutralization or agglutination or precipitation, all activate really the second form of the immune response that we've already talked about. So they'll trigger phagocytosis or inflammation, so that really the specific immune response in the case of antibodies can actually trigger a secondary the second layer of the immune response, which is non-specific but is actually turned on by the specific immune response, so that now you get inflammation and phagocytosis and the complement that we already talked about, now cleaning up and destroying whatever was there. So they work together. The specific arm of the immune response recognizes something very specific, but then that can activate the non-specific part of the immune response to come in and help it combat whatever that was. Specifically, when you look at the B cells, initially the B cells have antibodies really on their surface, and if they ever encounter the antigen that those specific antibodies were made against, they will copy themselves a lot or proliferate, so that now you have a ton of cells, all of which have that specific antibody looking for that specific antigen. Those cells now become little factories that are making tons and tons of antibody that gets secreted out and flows around your body. Those cells that are just pumping out tons and tons of antibodies are called plasma cells. All of these antibodies are capable of going out, finding the antigen they were made against, and triggering a non-specific immune response as well. Some subset of when you're making lots and lots of copies of these B cells will actually become memory cells. These memory cells last for years, maybe 10 years, maybe more, so that if you ever get exposed to a particular antigen, say you have chicken pox, and the pox itself has an antigen, your immune response recognizes it and responds to it, now you have some subset of those cells that will remember chicken pox for long periods of time, so that if you ever get exposed to the chicken pox again, your body's going to recognize it, those antibodies are still floating around, and they'll start an attack on it so you don't get chicken pox again. Because those memory cells live for a long time, the second time you get exposed to it, your response is a lot faster, and it will only take you a day or less for your B cells to start making tons more B cells and attack and get rid of whatever it is. The first time you're exposed to it, it may take a while longer for the few B cells that are there to recognize the antigen and mount an immune response. But the secondary response, the second time you're exposed to it, the response is much more rapid, much stronger, and much longer lasting. You can get immunity actively. That's kind of what we've just talked about, sort of a natural active immunity. You get the chicken pox, so now your B cells have been exposed to that antigen and you have a memory to it. You can also get it artificially. That's, you were vaccinated against it. You never really had the chicken pox, but you still got enough of the antigens that your immune system recognized it and responded to it. You can also get kind of a passive immunity. Babies, for example, in their mother's womb can have antibodies from their mother that will protect them. You can even get antibodies. So when you get gamma globulin or immune serum shots, you can actually get just the antibodies injected. The thing about that passive immunity is, though, you don't get a memory. You just kind of borrowed those antibodies for an immediate attack, but those antibodies aren't present in your body.